This phone costs just £129, euros or dollars, has a massive 7,000 milliamp hour battery, a 144Hz IPS LCD display, and Android 15 out of box. So is this Poco M7 4G the ultimate super budget smartphone? Let's find out. Let's talk design of the Poco M7 4G. The back is this weird sort of design profile, but it is super plasticky, as you can hear, and doesn't feel particularly premium in any way, shape or form. Also, it is quite heavy. To be exact, 224 grams in weight, which is a thick big boy to be exact. But then other main points of the design profile is its display. Yes, it has thicker borders all the way around and a pretty deep looking chin, but let's talk some real world specs. You get a 6.9-inch IPS LCD display at 144Hz with 700 nits of peak brightness. So this is an FHD plus resolution display. So when you're watching content back on here, this is where the display is excellent. It is rich, vibrant, and really colorful. It doesn't have the depth and quality in the blacks and certain color areas as an AMOLED or an OLED panel, but factor in the 129 price tag and that display does a really good job of displaying color. So watching content on here, be it darker or lighter, YouTube, Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount, wherever it may be, all of that looks really good. Living under this plastic backing is a Snapdragon 685 chipset. Now that chipset itself is quite old and is often found in super budget smartphones like the Poco M7. But when you're running it through benchmarks, because of that large battery, this is the best way to test it. Running through 3D Mark's Extreme Lifestyle Extreme Test, which is 20 cycles of the same thing over and over again, it gives you an idea of how the chipset performs, but most importantly, how the battery performs. Now, if you're looking at this in a real world scenario, this is only using 3% to run that 20 cycles. And in comparison, when you're comparing it to, say, something like the flagship smartphones that have over 6,000 milliamp hour batteries, things like the OnePlus 13, Oppo Find X8 Pro, roughly, they use over 10% in the exact same cycle. Now, to push that a little bit further, this is all battery related, to push that a little bit further, if you run through Antutu's benchmark testings, a very similar scenario, the heat dissipation only goes up by 4.4 degrees in terms of centigrade. It goes higher, but only uses 1% in its battery. So in terms of the battery life and the performance, which is the main thing of the Poco M7, it does an insane job. And one thing I've got to mention here, this is a silicon carbon battery with 7,000 milliamp hours and 33 watts of wire charging. So that battery is going to be multi-day as a bare minimum. A bit more detail about the Snapdragon 685 is when it comes to things like gaming, we'll touch on this very quickly, is if you want to play games, things like, say, Call of Duty Warzone, it won't even appear in your app list to be able to download because it's not compatible because of restrictions. The 685 chipset is probably more suited to games like Alto's Adventure or Super Mario Run. Now the reason being here is it is a low GPU performing game, so it's not going to be able to run those really high performance games, but the games that it does run really well, and the graphics on all of these look really good, super playable. And the best fit for this phone in particular and that chipset is more casual games, things like Super Mario Run, games like Alto's Adventure, Crossy Roads, Last War. All of those will work really well and graphically look super punchy and vibrant because of the FHD plus display. For the Poco M7, we've touched on a few downsides, things like the plastic backing, the sort of older style of display, but one of the other key things when it comes to Xiaomi's OS in general, especially on these Poco phones, is preloaded apps. We've actually dedicated a folder to them here, and you actually get 26 preloaded apps out of box that you're probably not going to use and you're going to want to delete, which is an option to delete those apps, but they are on there, which is a shame. But in terms of the OS, let's talk AI very quickly. This runs HyperOS 2.0, Android 15, and through a very quick update, when you first got the phone and set it up, you had to download that update to be able to prompt Gemini through the power button. So Google Gemini is the only AI system that works on here that is available, and the only AI feature. So if you hold down a power button, you get the prompt, but you can then also go into Gemini Live, which is great. The OS itself is pretty functional and has a lot of the features that you find on a lot of the top-end Poco / mid-range Xiaomi phones. So you'll be able to fully customize your experience when it comes to lock screen, display, icons, fonts, etc. That's all fully customizable. And then the display 144 Hz works really well with the OS. So if you're in and out of apps, transitioning, in and out of applications, multi-window, etc., or multitasking, I should say, all of that works very well. If you're scrolling online through a various number of articles or reading articles, again, that performance is very good. And then in an app, for example, like a weather app, for example, again, scrolling is super smooth, no issues there at all in any way. The shame here is the limitations on the AI, which is somewhat understandable, but of course, it's also the amount of preloaded apps. The back of the Poco M7 looks like it houses a multi-camera array, but it doesn't. What you get here is a 50 megapixel main lens and then an auxiliary lens. That's all you get in terms of rear camera housing. And then the performance, let's touch on that. So what you find here is a phone that's able to give you a pretty decent image in terms of processing. Colors look vibrant, but sometimes flat. They're not horrible in any way, but they are usable. But you're not expecting a really high-end performing phone when it comes to its imaging. It's pretty basic. If we move on to video, 1080p 30 is the cap here on the rear lenses. And again, very similar to the actual phone itself. It doesn't do a great job of demonstrating colors in real world scenarios, but it's good enough. All of the whole camera system from its photos and videos are all usable at best. So the Poco M7 is a super budget phone, and we've mentioned quite a few highs and lows of the phone itself, and we have to factor in a lot of those lows are indicative of a phone that costs less than £130, euros or dollars, 129 to be exact. But the highs, let's touch on those. You get a massive 7,000 milliamp silicon carbon battery, which will last you multiple days as a bare minimum. 144 Hz display, again, is really good, and combined with the IPS LCD as well, it does a really good job of being able to show that. And then performance as a whole on the OS is pretty decent as well, but there are a couple of downsides, and the main thing for us, I would say, is it's quite heavy and bulky, and you notice that immediately when you're using the phone, you pop in your hand, it does feel quite heavy. And then you've got a pretty basic camera system. One thing to note though, in terms of OS support, which will be another negative, this is probably going to get you no more than a couple of years of OS updates as a max before it's out of cycle, which is a shame. But one thing to mention about the Poco M7 is its price point, 129. Is this something that you would buy when you're factoring that budget price tag, all the highs and the lows? I feel as though this phone could have probably been a lot better if it was somewhat smaller, rather being at 6.8, 6.9 inches it is. If this was like a 6.5 or a 6.6 inch display, I think it would actually be better. It would then become lighter and still be able to house a pretty large silicon carbon battery. But let us know your thoughts on the Poco M7. Is this something you would buy? Would you avoid this category phone at all costs? But actually question this, is there a market for this style of phone, or should they just stop making it completely? Let us know in the comment section, and whilst you're there, be sure to like and subscribe. Until the next one, we out.